A very good evening to you, our esteemed viewers. Welcome to this edition of The Fourth Estate. I am your host, Agatha Taire. And today we are, as usual, going to be looking at the stories that have dominated the media, both traditional and social, during the week. And we'll start off with the story of the troubles, the unending troubles of the opposition, particularly FDC and its former president, Kizza Besigye, with the police, and how we can cover this better as journalists. We have seen these stories over and over again, but they still seem to manage to surprise us. We will also look at the planned boycott by the journalists against police activities and how that played out and what it has achieved or will achieve, if any. And we'll also, if time allows, go through the story of the ghetto that we failed to look at last time. The story of the ghetto and the scramble for the ghetto by President Museveni to try to capture, or what we think he's trying to do is capture the base of Honorable Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine, and also how it has turned out not quite in his favor, with all his people fighting against catching his eye. With me to discuss that and more today, one is a journalist, the other is a scholar and a columnist with The Observer, and we'll start with him, Yusuf Serunkuma. Welcome to the show, Yusuf.
Welcome.
Serunkuma is a columnist with The Observer newspaper. And we have Eliasa Muchibi Serunjoji, the managing editor weekend at the Daily Monitor. Welcome to the show, Muchibi.
Thank you.
We are looking at what happened during the week, and the buzzing story is how the opposition violently dealt with the issue. I mean, the police violently arrested opposition politicians, mainly former party president, former opposition presidential candidate Kizza Besigye, and the many other FDC activists and politicians that were arrested. Some at their FDC offices, and the other on their way to Nambole, where they had planned to have a rally. So Muchibi, I'll begin with you. How do you think the journalists should cover this better, with some people saying that the opposition maybe wants to provoke the police, and actually it's the police saying that mainly, but also keeping in mind the opposition and every Ugandan's right to assemble and to hold peaceful demonstrations?
Thank you, Agatha. I don't know what this provocation exactly entails we are talking about, because as a journalist, I have covered actually many of these protests before, and we continue to cover them. The issue is because we have a code of ethics, and our job is to ensure that we cover the stories as professionally as possible. And in every story, it is important to look at the key ingredients, and then you can determine what tools you may then use to cover it. What are the facts, for instance, in the most recent fallout, that altercation that happened in which Dr. Besigye was roughed up? What we know is that the opposition party, the Forum for Democratic Change, had organized to have a meeting in Nambole. And the police usually cite the public order management law to block such meetings, but in this case actually there is nothing in that law, if you have read it, because the law is very clear that the police will regulate meetings of a public nature and whatever, but there are exceptions And the first exception is if those meetings are organized by political parties. A registered political party, when it is doing its politics, because its job is to mobilize support, it can organize a meeting. Definitely, for purposes of maintaining law and order, it will usually be prudent that they inform the police that this will happen. And now, because there have been a lot of discussions about meetings taking place in busy places and all, in this case they are talking about Nambole Stadium, which is a closed space in which the opposition party says, we are going to have this discussion. What they do there, their politics, is not, I think, anything to concern the police. So if you look at those facts, and these people are saying, the police say you cannot go. The FDC says we will go because we don't break any law. Then the police move to block them from accessing the venue. But if you will notice, then after that, as it has happened so many times, you will not see any serious charges brought against anybody, because they have not broken any law for saying that we will have a meeting in a closed door environment to discuss our whatever. And it got even more bizarre when, after they were blocked there, they said, okay, we will now go to our headquarters. Maybe the police may argue then that that procession was going to take so many hours and it was going to paralyze business. It could take the whole day perhaps for them to move from Nambole to Najanankumbi. So I mean, if you are the commander, the police commander in charge, you have to make a lot of considerations. We have these people already here. They are going to Nambole. Why don't we let them sit? And but it is something that we definitely have seen a lot.
Yes, yes.
And so, as a journalist, I don't see how somebody will come and say the police have been provoked into action when they are actually not enforcing the law they are supposed to enforce. And also when they move on, because even the way Dr. Besigye was handled, you would expect that it doesn't matter, even if actually he had illegally, called an assembly. Yes. The police does not have power to punish.
Yes, 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 yes. You're right in saying that. You mean the way they tried to arrest him? Yes. So I'll come to you, Yusuf. Yusuf, the issue that is making what are accusing the police, the opposition, of provoking the police is what they term as preparedness of the opposition for these sorts of things. You remember we saw Besigye had a mask by the time they started to spray in his car, and the following day, while they arrested the women at the party headquarters in Najanankumbi, you could clearly tell they go out knowing what to expect. Could we perceive that to be preparedness in light of what they have faced before? Or I think another person might think that should make them think, let us not do this if that's what it's going to lead to. What do you think, Yusuf?
You know, in the colonial period,
yes, yes.
This is Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon has written this in The Wretched of the Earth, that the colonizer knew that the only language the colonized understood was violence. So the colonized, the only way the colonizer often treated the colonizer, the African, the native, it was often through violence. They were caned, they were harassed, they were beaten, they were done all those things that were violent to them. So the colonized quickly understood that if the colonizer thinks the only language we understand is violence, we will respond in the language that he knows that we understand, and that was violence. So after a period, you learn that the only language that this government appreciates, if you're a member of the opposition, is dealing with you violently. All right? You may not want to respond through violence. You may not want to go to the bush and fight back, or you may not want to pick arms and also fight back, which will be rather dangerous. But which is another debate altogether. But you learn that in every single thing that you're going to do, which involves organization, political mobilization, the state will often come to you with violence.
Yes, yes.
The language of the state is violence. Now, the least that you can do, if you can pick you cannot pick arms and respond in some language, you learn to prepare for violence. It's not really that they provoke so that they can get this violence, but a pattern has been established by the government that the only way you respond in any single thing that the government, the other political parties organize is violence. They have to be prepared. You surely have to give it to them. And you know, on that, it's really fascinating how the times have changed. Like in the 60s and 70s, governments were reacted to through violent means. Museveni himself came to power through the barrel of the gun. Coups were a legitimate way of taking office. Across the African continent, you go through a coup and take office, and you'll be congratulated the next day after declaring your presidency. The times have changed, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, and that was the time when the Musevenis, the Kagames, other people had already come to power through a coup. Now you can only get to office through the ballot. This is why we have political parties mobilizing. Now, it's really like, I don't know if like you appreciate the dynamic that you risk tempting people to pick up arms and go to the bush. Every time you respond through violence when they're doing legitimate politics, yes, yes, you risk harassing them into thinking that perhaps the time is now that we picked up arms and went to the bush. So if they cannot do that, they have to at least be prepared. So it's really very unfair to call it
yes,
provocation. It's
yes,
rather
yes.
preparation for something you've seen happen to them over a period.
I agree it is unfair, and we are talking about this to bring it to the audience to see what they think about that. But I agree that it is unfair for people to be doing what their inherent rights allows them to do, and you brutally every day.
Interesting note about the way Wesley was treated.
Yes.
When he was it called water gassing? What's the word for that? The
water cannon.
Yeah, like it came like a bullet and shot him down. I spoke to a very highly placed security officer, and he said Museveni has given them explicit instructions that when you're dealing with the opposition, it should be maximum force. Now, maximum force is not defined. All right, it depends on the one who is executing the order of maximum force. All right, so this is why you find that in cases like some guy is just using his open roof to wave at his supposed supporters, and the reaction
his
from
supporters,
supporters, you're not sure about that, right? You're not sure whether all those following Besie's position are really his fans.
Okay.
We learned from the times of Chitata that most of the guys were actually organized by the police to justify a budget. So you cannot be sure that all of them are his supporters. But anyhow, the point is this. The executor of the command defines maximum violence. This is why you see sometimes excesses from individuals, but the order is clear. And when you look at the police establishment, or military as it is, there's a very martinet structures. The structures of discipline in respect to orders are very, very strict. So if you see somebody executing an order in a manner that is rather strange or overwhelming, the extreme, it's not that really he's doing it on his own. Like this, the argument has been floated many times that individuals should be held to account. The fellow who commanded the interruption to Besie's procession has been profiled by the Daily Monitor. Area Sessions should tell us why. What is the argument behind profiling individuals? Because these are officers who are serving.
Okay, which brings me to my next question. Like Mchivi says, we shouldn't even be surprised anymore. But what happens is that the police seems to want to outdo themselves and be more brutal than they were the last time. Because the last time I think we saw what happened this week was when Gilbert Warner pepper sprayed Besigye in 2011. But the question is, we are seeing the police under a different command now. And you know, mainly the reason people are happy about the departure of Kaihura is the violence, the brutality that the police has come to be identified with. So why doesn't this change, despite what we have done by profiling those people, by really harassing them out? I remember when one would be in church and everyone would take pictures of him and see Besigye tormentor, and social media is always abuzz with those things. Why doesn't the police think about its image and and maybe change the tactic? I will start with you,
If you
Muchiri.
allow me, actually I wanted to make a distinction because Yusuf kept referring to the government, and actually who is doing this? It is the police, and I think it is important to make that distinction.
What is the
that the
difference?
police is supposed to be non-partisan, a professional force whose job it is to protect, to ensure law and order in this country. The Kampala Affairs Minister, Betty Kamya, put it very eloquently when she was still the other side. And she said, when the police kept breaking up protests, and she said, the job of the police is not to protect President Museveni from being overthrown by the people of Uganda, if that's what they want. So in this case, you see that ideally, actually, the police force should be able to distinguish between orders that are political in nature, because the people in the opposition have a legitimate right to fight for power, so long as they do it within the confines of the law. Now, the problem we have is they are given instructions, and now the instruction is there are not going to be any protests. It doesn't matter whatever cause it is. They are not, for instance, people like Bobby Wine will not sing anywhere, and the police implement that, even without a court order or anything. Let's say opposition members will not hold any rallies anywhere under any circumstances. Just this week ending, there was a press conference by some people from Kampala who said they own businesses, and they said they had petitioned the minister, Betty Kamya, saying, you see, we will not allow any opposition protests or rallies in Kampala because it disrupts business. I mean, you look at that, but if the president wants to go to Katwe or wherever in Kampala, he goes, and the police, of course, is the fountain of honor and the commander-in-chief. They will not say a word. But what he's doing there is politics. And
Yes.
if he wants a rally, or any of his supporters wants to do a mega rally in Kampala, they have Coral Airstrip, which has been reverted to his exclusive use. It is a public facility, by the way. I don't know why other political competitors or whoever may not use it, but it is under the president's office, and he's the only one who will use it. So you see all that unfairness. If it is skewed in that way, and they say, okay, if you are to hold any rally in Kampala, it has to be in a closed environment. And now the FDC say, we have the money, we are mobilized, and we are going to hire Namboole Stadium for that to happen. And you still think it is not, for some other reason, that is not going to happen. I mean, that is what we are talking about. Where does, because now it is not the government doing that, it is the police implementing it.
Yes.
And the police should be able to know, at the least they should be able to produce a court order and say, you are not allowed to do this because it's a breach of this law and whatever. Because you can't be the enforcer and then the interpreter of the law. That is often what they do.
Yes.
They say, this will contravene the Public Order Management Act, or we are holding you under preventive arrest and whatever. So if I go back, as a journalist, I mean, you take interest because you have seen the Constitution, you certainly have read it, and the police is a creature of the Constitution, and they have functions to discharge, and other laws. So if much of what we have as law in this country is being violated blatantly by the police, because we know that there is this latent, in the background, there is this instruction which everyone acting on behalf of the police or the security forces knows, or I don't think now a policeman or army officer needs to be told that basically has to be stopped. They outdo themselves trying to do that, or Bobby Wine or whatever, and they know that the more you do that, you are certainly
Okay, so
rewarded.
The question I asked earlier is, has the media had any impact? by what Yusuf said, us profiling these people,
Yeah.
and this has been since maybe 2001 or beyond. What impact or what role has the media played in ensuring that these people's constitutionally given rights are protected?
I don't know, you talked about impact. It depends on what the citizens want. Because the job of the media, as I understand it, is
Yes.
to actually elaborate, to bring to light what is it that has happened, which law, if any, has been contravened, whatever. So the public may want to use that information for whatever they want. That is, of course, in the immediate term. I think he's talking about monitor profiling one of the officers,
The latest,
Aguero,
yes.
and talking about what he did. And you're saying now this, because this is the system, somebody shouldn't be singled out and whatever. I think it was during the trials after the Second World War in Nuremberg, and they were talking about a man called Eichmann. Eichmann was the guy who was organizing death trails for the Jews on behalf of Adolf Hitler. And he goes and he argues that, you see, I was following orders. I was instructed to do that, and therefore, of course, the court wouldn't have any of that. And I think in public administration, there's something they call Eichmannism. If you want to invoke the system, to say that, you see, I did this because I was instructed, and we know it doesn't cut it, and I think there have been so many cases starting with that.
Okay, so
the opposite of Eichmannism is apartheid South Africa. The blame was put on the system, and everybody was let off the hook. Some people won Nobel Prizes. The victim and the perpetrator, the big victim and the big perpetrator took a Nobel for that. You know, like the system was made responsible for whatever happened. But there's something going to serve about the police. Historically, the police is not meant to serve the interests of the people. When we look at the history of the police in the 1600 Britain, it was meant to serve, to protect capital, right? Protect the rich from the interests of the poor. That's the history of policing in this institution. When you came to colonial Africa, the police across the colonized world emerged as a protector of exploitation, right? So it was to coerce people into farming or protect, and also protect the colonial government. So that's the history that the police across Africa still have. Now the challenge has been for so many police institutions to decolonize, become police serving the interests of the people. But the opposite is also like difficult. Like the state machinery has failed to decolonize. That you had exploiters who are white and foreign and colonial. You have men in office who are doing the same things as the colonial exploiters. So the police is essentially meant to protect the thieves, the exploiters, meant to protect power. So if you are aware of this history, you will appreciate that the context in which the police operates is that context of protecting the powerful.
okay.
And this is what happens. But there's another thing that I want to bring up, which I find really fascinating. Over the period of brutality that the opposition has faced in this country, I think there's a point you reach and say, when I'm engaging with the police, I expect ABC to happen. There'll be brutality. I'll be stopped from moving from this place to the other place, all right? And of course, there's political mileage when you try to move from Nambole to Najanankumbi and you're stopped. And you're in the news because you're brutalized, right? There's a bit of capital in that. But you expect that to happen because it's happened to you before. Now, my critique of the opposition is that this is very commonsensical. You're doing what is commonsensical. If you're really, I've argued before that, if you're really interested in challenging the status quo, you don't have to be caught up in the spectacle of news, the spectacle of being brutalized. The opposition has to do real things that are outside the spectacle. I mean, if you're going to organize a meeting in Ambole, that alone is very political, and you know how the place is going to react. It will not happen, all right? So as a member of the Wananchi, I'm concerned, why are opposition players mostly interested in doing things when they know the outcome of the things?
But you started by actually explaining that, and we have talked about it. These people think and know, which is true, that they have a right to hold assemblies, because that's how they mobilize as politicians. So if they know the impact, what are you suggesting they do?
Look, it is
how differently are you suggesting
okay, so
they do
the
that?
same opposition has told us this government is authoritarian, is an autocracy. They've confirmed this to us. Now, my problem is if you're living under an autocracy and you want to play politics that you're living under democracy, unless you're contradicting yourself. Now, people who operate under an autocracy do other things. They don't really do the common sense things like organize meetings, go out and mobilize, speak at a public forum, go to radio and mobilize. They do things clandestinely. The opposition in this country has to realize that if you want to mobilize, you have to mobilize outside the cameras. You don't go to the police and say, oh, by the way, we're going to be sitting in Ambole on this day. You may want to give us security. Because you know how they're going to react.
Can I allow Machibi respond to that in 1 minute before we take a break?
Yeah, because that's very interesting.
Yes, I thought so.
And it has been a deep conversation within the opposition about it. If you'll have heard when Dr. Besigye came up with what he calls defiance, and then they say, because that you see, our job is to defy what they call the oppressors. And then there is a side that they then dubbed compliance. That for them, they are talking about compliance. That you see, because
I think those ones are the ones doing things clandestine.
The regime has said this, then we comply and whatever. Then you will comply up to the end. They are saying, you see, because politics is exhibition. I mean, you must be seen to work, and so it is going to be a combination, in my estimation, of two things: that you have to organize clandestinely, as you're saying, and I want to assume that they do that, but after doing that, some work has to come onto the fore. You even organize. I think how Besigye has structured his politics is everywhere they have told him, you may not pass here, that is where he passes. And that is how you keep the population engaged.
And that is the provocation that the police is talking about.
Because the police will have to explain why I cannot pass there when everyone else will have to. And if unfair treatment is not challenged, then you're not talking about politics, you're not talking about struggle, you're talking about something else.
Unfortunately, we have to take a commercial break. We are going to come back to you, Yusuf. We are going to come back to you and we talk about the clandestine, those that are complying or not complying, if time allows, before we go to the other section of the public that is having troubles with the police, and those are the journalists. We'll be right back. Welcome back from that short commercial break. And before we took a break, Yusuf was itching to respond to Mchibi's claim. I don't know if it's a claim that politicians must be seen to be working. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes, Yusuf, for you to respond to that.
He more poetically, he said politics is exhibition. They have to be seen to be doing something. And I'm saying that has been the danger to this country. The obsession to be seen to be working has proven like dangerous to the one inch. I have argued before that there are happy people on both sides. The result of wanting to be seen to work has ended in what you can call careerism, that people are keeping these as jobs. Let me give you an example. When we were debating in this country, we were debating the removal of the age limit clause in the Constitution, there were plenty of options that had far-reaching impact, that would have a far-reaching impact on politics in this country that the opposition had taken, but they chose to go for the spectacle. They chose to be seen to work. They went to Parliament and debated against the bill, knowing that what determines the final result is not the debate, but the reaction, but the voting. They stayed in that Parliament and voted when they also know that at the end of the voting, you will lose. That actually legitimates the process. It was a process of it was a way of legitimating the outcome. They had an option: just walk out quietly and leave Museveni get 0 on the opposition and how many 340 on the other.
But you
Don't debate.
And you're talking about how you would have done things if you were the
No, they had 3 options.
I mean, everyone has what they think, and Vesture has responded to these issues before, that let's have it on record, let's expose this regime, let's show that we go to the election and the election is rigged.
Look, you exposed the regime for 30 years and then it collapsed after it's lived its time. You've done nothing basically. But look, here's the thing. To show you that it really worked in the advantage of the president actually bought both sides of the aisle. He paid the opposition to stay in that parliament and vote and campaign against the bill. They also paid the NRM to vote in favor.
Big allegation.
This allegation has been documented, it's been said all for a very long time. He paid both sides to have this happen that way, because the president was afraid of a terrible result.
Yes.
How would you say the process of removing the clause was legitimate when you have 0 against and you have 347 on the for, when there was no debate against in Parliament? And everything that was, if the opposition just chose to stay away from this entire thing, that would have had, by the way, they would have been accepted as players in this political space.
Your thoughts
but
on
also,
that briefly.
It would have been a dent.
Yusuf,
on
we have to move to the next
but
point.
The obsession of wanting to be seen is really dangerous to the country.
Your thoughts on that?
I mean, my thoughts would be very elaborate, and I'm sure I don't have the time, because what Yusuf is talking about is that if somebody decides to act outside the law, or to serve their interests, what you need to do from the other side is boycott, if you can do anything about it.
Well, not boycott, but also work outside the law.
I mean, work outside the law. I mean, there have been boycotts before. I remember after the 1995 Constitution was passed, after the election of 96, of presidential election, then some people decided we will boycott Parliament. Damian Olvega was one of them. So the DP people boycotted Parliament. They wanted to come back because they saw that now they are outside the conversation. Damian Olvega tried to come back later, and Ken Luchams was too entrenched in the constituency, and so DP maybe declined, its decline, and then when it ceded power to Besigye as he comes, space to Besigye 2000, whatever, you could trace it a bit from that, their decision to boycott. So I think the more robust argument has been again put out by some people is there will be no debate or no activity without us. We will participate, we will use all our efforts, wherever it ends, because you don't know if you are struggling to get political change, as some people have decided to do. You don't know when it will happen.
Thank you, Muchibi. We have to move on from that subject. Interesting as it seems. And speaking about boycotts, Yusuf, we are going to see its effectiveness. If you're saying boycotts are effective, with the media in this country trying to boycott police activities, and during the week they had a march to the police headquarters where they wanted to give a petition to hand it over to the IGP, Martin Okoth-Ochola. And surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, but during that protest, another journalist or more were brutally arrested and beaten. So we are asking, how has this boycott played out? They have given the police up to Thursday, the 11th, to have responded, or how do you think it will play out, since you seem to be saying that boycotts can... Yes.
You know, I enjoyed November 4. In fact, I wrote a column last week, November 4. November 4 is a wonderful day in the history of this country. While Besigye was being brutalized and his team on the streets of walking from Nambole to tried to walk from Nambole to Najjanankumbi, yes. Makerere University was up in arms. The students were protesting against the fees increment. And then the journalists were also... So the place, there was a little bit of stretch to the place. The three protests organized on different agendas stretched place a little bit, right? And I think that every time, that what is going to happen in this country, you'll have a day in this country where like people take to the street, all of them on the street for different reasons, all right? Not a singular reason brought Makerere police and well, there's a connection. But yes. Different reasons will pour people onto the street of Kampala. Bobo may want to continue singing there'll be a protest against rent in Kampala, and all those 5 or 6 or 7, wherever, the doctors could be protesting, and the teachers could be protesting too, the judiciary could maybe do something as well. So one day in this country, they'll meet on the streets of Kampala, all of them protesting different things and organized differently. Now, that day will be fascinating in the history of this country, because I don't know how the place is going to deal with this, like, very, very unorganized, different protests. But the point I want to speak to about the media boycott of the place is I want to go back to this thing that I said the other day, that the boycott has to be internal, not external. The boycott has to be from within. There's a conversation that has to be held within the media houses. For example, there must be implications, there must be financial implications to the media houses so that to take this boycott seriously. You know, I just imagine one day if NTV reporters said, unless the owner of NTV had a serious conversation with police, we are not reporting any stories. We're not reading any news, right? The designers, everybody in the house says we are putting our tools down, unless the person with big money, the person with the bigger voice, went and sat down with the state, so that we can have a conversation over our safety. I dream for a day when Eriasa and his team put their tools down. We are not printing tomorrow's paper unless the owner of NTV, the owner of Nation Media, of Monitor, sat down with the state to have a negotiation. Because as you know what, the state is always a combination of politicians and merchants. Yes. The owner of NTV is by extension part of the state, because he's employing laborers who are working for him. So laborers working for the Aga Khan, or whoever owns Monitor and is running Monitor at the level at the top, has to sit down with the state and have a concentrated, somber negotiation on how the security and safety of the people working for them need to be treated. Besides that, this is like window dressing. Because, you know, the disconnect between the foot soldiers on the ground and the owners of capital is huge. I was reading a write-up to that, you know, editors said, reported not to have been informed about the journalists going to the streets.
Well, we have an editor here. Let's ask him and see what he says about that.
There must be that excuse you can never have, that while the house is on fire, they're waiting for your kids to come and tell, hey, Daddy, you know the house is on fire? So
Muchiri, respond to what Yusuf is saying. I remember, yes, he made these comments while we were here, the last time we talked about it. And this has been the criticism that has faced this boycott. Of capital that the UJA, which is the Uganda Journalists Association, has not organized very well. Both the journalists and the editors and the media owners. And that's why we might see a flop of this. So what are your views? And you sit here as a journalist and as one of the editors. It would be interesting to hear your take on it.
That he wasn't mobilized.
Yeah, before I speak about the disorganization within the media fraternity, as far as that is concerned, I am even more intrigued by what happened with the police force. Because our colleagues, I was unable to join them. I don't work Mondays, and I didn't actually know that the position was going to be that serious because there had been no communication beyond what had been said. But the political commissar of the police, the assistant, I think, is it assistant IGP, Hassan Kasinja, was seated in Aguru waiting for journalists to deliver a document, their petition to him, while other, I don't know who actually commanded the operation that ensured that they don't walk there. And then they first arrest some of them, include particularly my brother Bashir Mbazira, the president of UJA. They take them to CPS, and then the conversation continues as if until they say, okay, now you come to Naguru and air your views and bring your concerns. So it is not just the journalists, even the police, they don't know now, because definitely Hassan Kasinja would be much more senior than whoever commanded the operation against journalists. When you turn to the boycott that was called, you know, it is very difficult to say, I am the president of UJA, or we are the UJA executive, and we have sat down and called a boycott. We don't have a General Assembly, but also we have not been able to engage anybody beyond UJA, because as I can tell you, for instance, from Monitor, there is no one on the UJA executive. I don't know whether there is any from New Vision. I'm sure there is none from NTV. From many media houses, there has been, of course, a big problem with constituting a leadership for journalists in this country that would be representative and maybe able to distill the issues and deal with them definitively. I think that is a problem in its own. So you hear that now journalists have said, UJA has said, tomorrow we are going to protest. And Monitor, if I may just speak for Monitor, for which I work, we definitely, some of our journalists had been brutalized, and I only learned that day when I saw them on TV that they were actually part of the protest. There will be no sanctions against somebody who says, I have to do what? To enforce my rights. I am going to petition the police leadership to do A, B, C, D, and whatever. But in all, actually, all you can say is, that is all you can say about what happened with the boycott. It is very difficult then, if it is not coordinated, what activities of the police don't you cover? If it is press conferences and some of the things they have done, that is easy. But my insistence has always been, let's not report for the police, let's report about the police. And we will always do report about the police, whether you call it boycott or not.
So what you're saying is that the problems we are seeing with the boycotts as a result of uncoordination between us, the journalists, leave alone the bigger moneyed people
the
that
of money.
No, he has pushed that argument and pushed it very eloquently from last week to today, and I don't want to dismiss it. I think there is going to be a league of media owners who are going to sit down, and they are going to be saddled, I think, with so many other interests, as to then say, call a press conference and say, we have engaged with the state and we have, these are the issues we have raised, and given these, let's say, conditions, unless they are met, we are going to do the following. Because the ownership of media in this country is very varied, but I don't know how many politicians own radio stations and whatever, and then those who don't own radio stations are going to also be in a position to be influenced by the police in one way or the other.
Okay.
And as I argued last week, it's about the politics. When you work in an environment within which we work, it is very easy for us to call out people and say, but this one is not standing up, that one is not standing up, but you have a system that makes sure to squeeze everyone from their corner using different levers.
Okay, so before we leave the issue of police, Yusuf said an interesting thing about Monday, 4th November, the police being stretched. And I have argued here, when I had the privilege of sitting that side, that we see police overstretched only in crime, in criminal matters. Someone is kidnapped, someone. But I don't think we have seen the police overstretched in protests, political protests, Makere protests. How stretched were they? I don't know if you want to talk about it, or Michiwi wants to talk about it, because we actually think they are uncalled for, that whole deployment for just female students or students trying to assemble, or the FDC going to Nambole to hold a meeting. Why would we call that a stretch, as if they are...
It was a starter. Like if you are going to have a meal, there's always a starter, and then before the main dish comes. So there was a starter. It was a pointer, a couple of pointers you could pick from it. That also, it showed us that people really starting to appreciate that protest is the main language of discourse in this country. That the language now that is hearable is the language of protest. You know, like you want to have significant impact, you get press coverage, you protest. But also, you said that the reaction of the police is uncalled for. It is actually called for if you appreciate that their intention is to protect the state. The police is not protecting the ordinary person.
Which is not their mandate.
Well,
it
no,
might
historically, we could have a different mandate on paper, but from their own forming, from their birthing, the interest in protecting power and the landlord.
Okay.
But Agatha, you took me from a good point. I wanted to say something
Which
about about the owners of capital. Perhaps not in response to what Mchevi said, but just to like stretch my critique a bit more. The owners of capital have often ignored their laborers, right? They are not often concerned about the living conditions and the working conditions of their laborers. So when we're looking at media in the state and the employers, we need to appreciate it in the dynamic of labor and the employers of labor. The employers often ignore their laborers because they know they'll often go back, the men unemployed, they often go back to the street and pick somebody and come and employ them.
Yes.
So they can leave the working conditions of those that they employ already to peril. Whatever happens, we don't mind. We can always find unemployed people and bring them to the park. So here is what I think media houses to do. And if what is his name? Mbaz Kazwe is listening, he should know that he should mobilize the laborers. Because if WUJA is a trade union of sorts, they have to appreciate that labor has to the first direction of labor is with the employer. So the first conversation should be, if they're doing an industrial action, it shouldn't be against the object of their reporting. It should be against their employer.
Okay.
Organize as possibly could and fight against them chivis.
Okay, so before we are taking a commercial break, but Mchibi, in 1 minute, can you talk about the police being stressed with these protests and all?
How many policemen were deployed at the different, those 3 protests? I don't know, but I can safely bet it was less than half of the manpower that they have. So
it wasn't really half.
I think it's less than half of the manpower that they have. If there were other protests, what you need to know is that our police is combat ready when it comes to protests, because the political leadership has decided there is not going to be any protests, and they are not going to let them coagulate into something bigger, like what was in Tahrir Square or whatever. So there is a lot of capacity in that field. The
deployment structure is very fascinating if you study it. So when they send the first set of military officers to go and deal with students at Makere, another set takes over their positions. So the police moves, a set takes over the position of the police. So the assumption is if they went and joined the students, we send these who took their positions to go and bring them back. That means you go deal with those who have joined the protests. So then you have another layer. So there are about 4 layers of deployment. So if you have the field officers, maybe 100 of them, and behind them there is another 300 of them.
Yes.
Taking position, ready to see what happened in the first set we've sent, so that we can move in. That's how they've been dealing with the process for a long time.
Okay, so moving on from that, and definitely not from Museveni's politics, because he seems to, apart from the police that has gone out of its way to frustrate all his challengers, he seems to have very many strategies. And today we need to talk about the scramble for the ghetto. We have seen Museveni appoint this one and that presidential advisor for Kampala, for the youth, and maybe for musicians or the music industry. But what we think Museveni didn't see coming is the fight, the more fights that this would create within the NRM. And the current one we've seen is the fight between those that have been appointed of late to help President Museveni with the musicians or the youth that he thinks is the advantage that Bobi Wine has over him. The latest being Catherine Kusasira and the chairperson Kampala Central, Salimu Uhuru. What do you think? How do you think this is going to help Museveni that he had seen as a strategy to win, to give him an advantage over Bobi Wine? Muchibi.
You said the president perhaps didn't see it coming. I think he saw it coming, because it is not the first time. That is how his system, his politics works. If you are talking about Kampala, I think you may just need to stretch a bit further than even the emergence of Bobi Wine. And how you're talking about the fight for the ghetto. I don't know what ghetto means in this case. For me, I think actually it is a fight for the low-income earners, the poor people in Kampala. And it has been on for a very long time. If you remember, just go back to 2016, for instance. After the election, that's the heaviest that President Museveni has suffered within Kampala, according to official results. And he blamed it on Jennifer Msisi. the former Attorney General Ruhindi, Frederick Ruhindi, lost Nakawa, and he said, you see, Jennifer, she mistreated people in his constituency, and the people voted in protest against the party. And the president bought into that line, and we began to see the decline of Jennifer Msisi, her influence, and she eventually had to resign. Actually, when she resigned, I wrote in Monitor that Msisi was an experiment that failed. The experiment had been that the president is going to pour a lot of money in Kampala, build roads, clean up, remove the garbage and everything, and that would possibly translate into more political support. When the election came, actually they had suffered a worse defeat than they had suffered in the previous elections. And that strategy was immediately abandoned. That is when you see now the president appoints a new group of people led by Betty Kamya. Betty Kamya becomes Kampala minister. There was naturally a bit the minister for the youth also, but especially Betty Kamya. And instead of, because before that Jennifer Msisi had been conducting the president around Kampala, come and see what we are doing to the taxi park, come see what we do with the roads. Now she's abandoned, and Betty Kamya is taking the president around Kampala, visiting people and donating billions of shillings. Different whatever. I mean, there was that phase. And Betty Kamya then said the president will win with 90%, everything is sorted. So what we see, it doesn't surprise me. I think with the emergence, with or without Bobi Wine, the president had, first of all, a change in approach. Immediately after the election in 2016, he changed his approach towards Kampala. He said now the vendors who are being chased down because, I mean, of the illegal trade, I don't know whether that is even true, they are not going to be chased down anymore. We are not going to evict anybody. We will now do the politics and counter Lukwago, Besigye, and they had been there, and before that Lukwago had declared himself field commander. The person and all the analysis showed that the poor people voted for him. Now, so Bobi Wine just comes in as a new sensation, and now they have given it a name, the ghetto. It is not just about the ghetto, it is a fight for the poor. That fight, when I think towards the 2016 election, when Jennifer Msisi was at her height, one eloquent commentator, that is Karundi Serumaga, I saw he wrote in the East African, saying Kampala elites have decided to modernize using, by abolishing the poor. Because then, you throw them away. So basically what I want to say is this has been going on, and those fights, when Betty Kamya was appointed, there were so many fights. People saying, but we have been here. Babo, whoever people who had led Kampala before, we have been here, we are the legitimate leaders. And so what we are seeing is nothing new, but the president will just keep shuffling players until he gets the people he thinks can deliver Kampala. Okay,
on that elaborate note, we have to take another short commercial break, and when we return, we will hear Yusuf's views about this scramble for the ghetto, or the low-income earners, as Mchiwi puts them. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break, and we are talking about the latest strategy of Museveni, which Mchiwi doesn't think is the latest, but we think it is his bid to challenge or to gain an upper hand over his latest challenger or rival, Honorable Chagulanyi, the Chadondo East MP. And the latest of this has been his latest advisor. On what issue? Please remind me. Kampala issues?
Affairs.
Yes, Kampala affairs.
Yes,
Musician Catherine Kusasira having a spat with Salim Uhuru, the chairperson of Kampala Central. And he was telling Uhuru to write to her officially. That is Catherine Kusasa saying she is now in a higher position than Salim Uhuru and should therefore write to her officially if he wants any meeting with her. And when we talked about it, Muchibi said President Museveni must have seen that coming. When I said maybe that's not the result he hoped to achieve, why would you think that works for Museveni to create further squabbles, more squabbles in the NRM than the party already has?
I'm not sure this emerging squabbles are part of his making. Maybe he didn't see them. I'm not sure whether they're really his. Because I see two things happening in this conversation. One is there's a laugh at the margins, right? The margins of society, especially if you're having a class society where you have the rich and the poor, there's so much life on the margins. In fact, in cultural studies, we've argued that there's plenty of writing to show that life is actually made at the margins. Culture is made at the margins. We have language being manufactured at the margin of society. We have new modes of social negotiation, music and writing and creativity and popular culture. All of these emerge at the margin of society. Shakespeare, for those who read Shakespeare in school, Shakespeare used to be a text that was read by the everyday people. So the ordinary people often have their contestations which inform the sort of mainstream or high class from the mass. So there's plenty of life. When you look at Bob Wine, for example, they give us words like Chiwani. Chiwani was a word that was used on margins. Now it is a mainstream terminology. So there's plenty of life at the margins. So we need to take that away from the life at the margins. You shouldn't even seek to say, because every society, be it America, if you go to New York, there's a section where there's plenty of cultural, social, political production. And this is life on the margin society. So there's power there. And the major power there is that life on the margin circulates and travels so fast. And politicians often want to jump into and get captive from the life on the margins. So basically, Museveni is doing that too. Because, but you can't take it away from Bobi Wine, right? When Bobi Wine became Member of Parliament, he actually made it even more powerful, that there's so much life on the margin of society. We are creative and we have power. Now, the second thing that is happening is, and I want to disagree with Elias Mchibi on this one, because it's been said plenty of times, that there's a fight for low-income earners, right? I want to disagree respectfully. It's not a fight for low-income earners. It's a fight to control the mindset that poverty creates. Poverty creates a mindset. Now, that mindset is that which the president is going into to control. This is why he's giving money. By giving money at the same time as he's brutalizing the margins. You remember, I think last year in Kamwasha, there were police moving in and beating up people, but sometimes somebody was moving the following day with loads of cash. All right, so he's trying to, and this mindset that poverty creates is that, the stuff that we used to say that I think was across African countries, the most autocrats used to think that, or to argue quite eloquently, that the rich are ungovernable. It's only the poor that can be governed. So what has happened over a period, and governments had these elaborate policies of impoverishing their compatriots. So you have Jinja, which was a bustling industrial town, a ghost shadow of itself. Right now, if you go there, you have coffee, which was a major cash cow in this country, is dead. And these are not like they're dying on their own because they've been left to the market. They're deliberate policies that have killed these places so as to impoverish the people so that you can actually govern them. All right? That was a deliberate. Forget, this thing has been said, transformation people, Intandikwa, and then what else do we have now? We have Operation Wealth Creation. That's a facade. The actual thing, the actual mindset is that the poor are governable. But poverty creates a mindset at the same time. It creates a mindset where you have nothing to lose, and so you don't care at all. All right? So in 1 minute? And with the rise of Bobi Wine, I want to build this case a little bit. With the rise of Bobi Wine from the condition of poverty and impoverishment, the poor have realized their power. And their power is informed by the mindset that we have nothing to lose, and we are able to do anything possible to change our condition.
So that
And
is what Museveni is trying to do.
He's going in that he's not going there to fight for their vote. No, he doesn't want an election. Museveni doesn't want the vote of the poor so that he can win an election. That's the easy bit. What Museveni has mastered over the years, he has to control the mindset. And Chief here mentioned something about Kampala. Across, after the Arab Spring, we've now realized that most autocrats are going out of office because of protests in their major cities, right? You go to Zimbabwe, Mugabe left because something happened in the major capital. When you go to across the Arab Spring, Egypt, there were protests in the major cities. The man who just left office in DRC, Kabila, there were protests within the city that forced him to leave office. Yes. So Museveni knows that Uganda is not an exception. And the poor are often the foot soldiers who take to the streets and challenge the status quo. That is more worrying. That is more worrying.
I could see Muchibi disagreeing.
It's more worrying than going there to look for their vote. You're going to counter the mindset that poverty has created. They have nothing to lose. They can
Okay, Muchibi, what do you think about Museveni not looking for the vote of the low-income earners or the ghetto as we have come to perceive it? Because we call it the ghetto because Kyagulanyi has been the ghetto, like synonymous with the ghetto, while he was a musician and now as that he's a politician. So what do you think about what Yusuf said?
My interpretation is that Yusuf says Museveni doesn't need votes. He can find a way to stay in power anyway. But the important thing is the current political dispensation all over the world is you must be voted into power, or at least be seen to be voted. To be voted into power, and that is important.
But also it's true, you can be protested out of power. It's also true.
No, yeah, and you see, if in Uganda you are going to get so many people out on the streets, one of the things that may excite people into doing that is if people believe that they have actually voted you out, they have won, and you have. So there is that very important imperative that has been pursued by the people who control power in this country for a long time, that after every election, an impression must be created. At least there has to be doubt, even in the minds of those who hate President Museveni the most, that maybe they didn't win something. But I wanted to say something very quickly about this fight for what you have called a fight for the ghetto, something good coming out of it. Next to Monitor, there is a place, there's a community center of sorts, and I see young men who are being trained to become masons, become mechanics, and whatever. I spend some time trying to observe what they do, and I think they do amazing work. And so
and it is a result of this fight?
Definitely. So what has happened, it is happening all over the place. I mean, young women being, given skills. Men, I think that is Wabigalo. That is just one of the places. There are many places in this town, and I think those who graduate, who eventually learn, are then given maybe toolkits and then 1 million shillings to go out. I don't know, but many hundreds have since graduated, and so one thing that maybe Bobi Wine has done, and this fight is, and it has come out maybe, and it hasn't been highlighted enough, is that now the president has paid a lot more attention. This started after 2016, by the way. Paid a lot more attention to the people who are jobless, and what skills can we give them, then what can they do.
And as I think we should leave
my conclusion
that
to that
topic.
Is that he's doing that not really so that they can vote for him, because Bob Wine showed them that they are powerful. And one of the ways they can use their power is by going to participate in a democratic, in a linear electoral
voting
process.
Against him, which
that is one way.
thing.
But many of them, a huge number of them, are itching for a street fight. And some is more concerned about the possibility of a street fight, because that's uncontainable. And because he's seen it happen elsewhere.
Let's go to your
So
residence. Let's go back to your residence, Makere, and what has become of the big strike we've seen there for the last, how long did it take? Over 2 weeks. And now we think we've seen calm being restored. Recently, one of my former lecturers called me. He hadn't realized I had left and asked me if it is come for him to come and teach. And
come and teach you?
Yes, and teach. Yes.
Of the lecturer.
So I first called and the people told me, no, it's as good as nothing. It's as if nothing happened here. And most importantly, we saw the Vice Chancellor, Professor Nawangwe, the other day in Parliament, and he seems he's saying, like, as if for him nothing happened. He did not say anything about the property, the lives, the injuries that were, the chaos that happened there, during which he was quiet most of the time. We want to know, why does Nawangwe in most of these prefer to push stuff under the carpet and move on as if nothing happened? And how will that affect the calm that we think has been restored at the university?
You know what I find fascinating is that Makerere University never issued any condemnation against the violence that was met against students. It was business as usual for them. I remember hearing the DVCA, Dr. Omar Kakumba, saying they didn't have control over what happened, right? It wasn't on their invitation that the military moved in and brutalized students.
So who should take responsibility for that?
Well, I'm not asking the university to take responsibility, but they would have come out to condemn the way the students were treated when they're doing a thing that actually the university trains them to do. Activism is part of the university. And in fact, activism defines a university. So if the university wasn't given, if the students were brutalized when they, the reason for activism doesn't have to be right or wrong. It's just that activism is part of the university. If students were brutalized by an external force that you had no control over, at least a condemnation would be in order, right? Because, you know, other partners of Makerere University came out and condemned the violence. MasterCard, the American Embassy, the European Union, the African Studies Association, which I'm a board member, we issued a statement condemning the violence that was met against the students. All right. So but Makerere did not, which I found really fascinating in this conversation. But the major topic.
And what do you think are the implications of that?
The implications of that is that you know, the claim that Makerere is in bed with the president gets more credence, right? That, you know, the violence against students, which Museveni's fear that these students could be thinking about taking my regime, that, you know, across the world, what started a small students movement against good education, bad education against the living condition of the students, often ends in big things that threaten the seat of the government. So you would argue that the management of the Makerere University and the president are in the same line of thought. And to that end, it's no point for them condemning the violence meted against the students. So, you know, that's what it solidifies. We have had this mindset. There is evidence to it. We have evidence, plenty of material to support this. But now that the university hasn't come out to condemn the violence that was meted against students, you know, there's legitimate ground to solidify what we think. But there's another fascinating thing that happened, and the altercation between MP Zake and the Vice Chancellor. You know, many people have come out to condemn MP Zake, right, for being disrespectful to an elder. And I think there's an investigation going on in Parliament about it.
Yes.
But I want to say this quite respectfully. Respect is earned. It's not a product of age. It's not a product of academic violence? Accomplishment. I'm not condemning. I'm saying
I mean, are you condoning violence?
I want to say this is a very theoretical point I'm trying to say. That respect, the aura of integrity that people give to you is earned. You have to earn it. It doesn't come to you because you have a PhD, you're a professor. It doesn't come to you because you're old. You know, I'm a Muslim, but, you know, in Islam, we believe the Prophet told us that even your kids, the respect of your kids is earned, is not given. If you're returning home on a bad day and we're unable to get anything to take home, the Prophet encouraged us to pick stones and put them in the hands. Let me finish, in the hands of your kids, so that they know our father or our guardian is responsible. Now, failure to seek to earn the respect of those below you with an age or in academic accomplishment is not their problem when they disrespect you. It's not their problem. It's mutual, right? If
okay, so we get your point, and before we go into MP Zake and the Vice Chancellor, I would like Muchibi to respond to the question I asked first. Him ignoring what happened, the atrocities, the chaos, the mayhem that happened at the university, even when he had a chance, when he appeared before a committee of parliament, and who should take responsibility, because it cannot be the police. I think the university is responsible for its students.
Sure.
So I would like Mchibi to respond to that.
Yeah, we have taken issue with some of Professor Nawangwe's methods. Actually, since he took over, I remember one day we published a story in Saturday Monitor saying, with the headline, Nawangwe turning Makerere upside down, with the ivory tower turned upside down. He was mad about it. But because the key issue is you're wondering why the professor may not condemn that. But to me, there's been a trend for the 24 so months he's been in charge now that would suggest that he is very keen on reducing the liberties that people at Makerere University enjoy, especially the students, but also lecturers and other members of staff. We did a count. I think again Saturday Monitor we had a story about Nawangwe and his fights with students and staff, and at least 65 people, either students or workers there, have during the 2 years he's been in charge been subjected to some form of disciplinary action. And of course that will be more than what any of his recent predecessors have done. I was surprised when I passed Makerere recently and I found, I had heard of it and it had gone out of my mind, that the Freedom Square was fenced off. Put a fence around the Freedom Square. And I don't know what we would have done if we were still there, but to us the Freedom Square was very dear because it is about freedom.
It was very secret, yes.
I mean,
yes.
you go there and whatever. Why? Professor Nawangwe would imagine that we needed to fence it off. Is it to... And there were protests against it, and he refused to do it. So, to me, I'm not surprised that he will not feel that the protests were dealt with, because he didn't want them to happen in the first place. And I would imagine that what happened eventually is a ceasefire. It is not the end of the strike. They ceased the fire because we have not heard from the students how it concluded,
Yes.
why, and the issues that they put across have not been dealt with. I don't know whether it will resume or not.
Okay. So as we wrap up, I would like us to briefly, in the remaining minutes, talk about the regional politics. And I have competent people to talk about that.
You know, interesting on this one, the State Square here in Kampala was fenced off. You know what happened to that? It was a place where the poor, when you're tired, you'd go and relax there. You can't relax there anymore. So as it happened in the city,
allow us to move on. We will have that conversation again. So let's talk about regional politics. We have had 2 presidents visit in just 1 week. And that's the South Sudanese president and his Salva Kiir and his contemporary, and today as we speak has the DRC president left already, and I would like you guys to briefly, like in 2 minutes each, talk about the statesmanship, the regional politics, and how Museveni is still dominating that. Yusuf, let's begin with you.
Yeah, I mean, the graduate Museveni is still dominating. Well, the president of the Republic of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, is essentially there because the president wants him there, but otherwise
because President
Museveni wants him there.
How so?
Because if the political social processes were allowed to take their course inside South Sudan, Riek Machar will be president. All right, I've had confidence tell me that you go to a meeting and you find Salva Kiir high on alcohol, and he's at the meeting and is basically doing nothing, that he would have collapsed a long time ago. There are really strong forces fighting against, but Museveni has done so much to prop him.
Why?
To prop him. Oh, there's so much money in South Sudan. South Sudan has
you could still have
resources.
so much money with Riek Machar as president, right?
Well, that's debatable because Riek Machar is very independent minded in more. I mean, he's a PhD. He's more soberly thinking than his counterpart who took over vacuum after General Garang died. So, you know, but the political forces are really not in favor of Salva Kiir, but because the president, so Salva Kiir is often coming to this country to still negotiate the ways in which this relationship is maintained. And on the other hand, when you look at DRC, some story, Kabila, I mean, you know, we made Kabila president in Congo, and Kabila negotiated a deal with Tshisekedi to become president. So the relationship between South Sudan, DRC, Congo, and Uganda remain, because, you know, the presidents are friends of each other. But the bigger point is this: it's about resources, right? You know, from our history with South Sudan, with DRC, we have had a scramble for resources inside DRC.
Yes.
It's not dead. It's not gone. We would have gone out of the.
So, but if we are the ones benefiting more, why is it the other party? Because President Felix Tshisekedi has come here twice now since he took office.
You have no idea.
Museveni was actually acknowledging the imbalance.
Okay, so you have no idea how strong are the forces that are fighting against Kabila in DRC. The forces are really strong. So DRC has about 6 secessionist movements. All of them are really strong, by the way. All of the 6 are really strong. So they're trying to see from this. The country is like being broken apart. And you know, Museveni is a darling of the West. He still is a darling of the West because of regional stability and doing their bidding across the region.
Yes, in 1 minute.
So for the economic interests that the West has in DRC, they still see the president as a good ally to have in the region. And the players in DRC still see the President Museveni as a good person to have on their side, because he already has, you know, all these are junior presidents. They just become president. This is a Honjo who has been around for quite some time. They still need him for these political negotiations that are going. But you need to look at the money and the resources to understand.
Okay.
The broader
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut you short. We are running out of time. Let's hear Mchi's views on the same subject as we wrap up.
Yeah, perhaps South Sudan interests me most. We know that it has been a tragic case.
Yes.
And President Museveni has had the role of playing big brother over it. If it has been a tragedy, it is something that I think he even thinks about, that would reflect on his legacy if he left today. You know that the mediation has most of the time been before IGAD. Then the African Union has tried to come in, the US, everyone, but you just want to get Riek Machar and Salva Kiir work together in an arrangement that will bring peace to South Sudan. And we are one of the biggest victims. I'm talking about Uganda, because then you're going to find so many South Sudanese refugees keep coming to Uganda whenever there are disagreements there. Then we would be big beneficiaries, like we had started benefiting. When there's peace and prosperity, there are so many Ugandans who are benefiting. The other issue that, of course, has to be mentioned is, I don't know how many cars you see around that have South Sudanese registration plates, and many of them really, really big cars. That, of course, has been mentioned by so many people. So to the South Sudanese, this is another home, and many of them have been accused of looting the country and bringing it here. And so President Museveni has such a huge role to play. I don't know how this will turn out, if the timetable they came up with will actually work this time.
And is there any connection between what you're seeing now with the Rwanda-Uganda issues that we've been seeing of late? Because it looks like they have both presidents have been trying to win over more neighbors than the other.
Yeah, definitely, because they are political rivals, and they are the 2 big brothers in the region. If you're going by longevity, yes, they have been there. I don't know for how much longer they will both stay. But the important thing is, I just wanted to quickly talk about Congo. You know about the rivalry.
Yes.
Our rivalry with Rwanda started in Congo, and we have legitimate interests within the Congo. I saw the agreement they signed. They are talking about trade and expanding this and that. But Uganda has deeper concerns about maybe rebels, people going there to organize and do this. But if Congo just woke up and the economy started working and working properly, I can see how Uganda would benefit substantially. So there is a legitimate interest for Uganda, for President Museveni to pursue prosperity and, of course, peace and prosperity across the region for us to benefit.
Yusuf, can you afford to use 1 minute and you respond to that, the connection with what we are seeing, the presidents being here and the Rwanda-Uganda relations? I
don't know. I think it would be speculation to say that there's a fight for friendships between Paul Kagame and Mr. Museveni in the region. I don't think so. I don't know whether I've been following if Tshisekedi hasn't visited Rwanda at the same time. But I think, you know, there are different interests being negotiated on the either side of the aisle between Rwanda and DRC and Uganda and DRC. So I think plainly now we can say it's okay for them to have their different negotiations. Yes. It will be really speculating on our part to stretch and say there's a fight.
And also actually we should add that Tshisekedi was in Luanda, Angola, when Uganda and Rwanda signed an agreement.
So I wouldn't want to
I can see how Yusuf is playing safe on this one. So
really, I have no interest in that.
I
really have no interest. I can't
thank you, gentlemen. We have to be out of here. We thank you very much, our viewers, for staying up late to watch the show. We thank the production that has brought this show to you. And until next Sunday, have a blessed week and a good night. Thank you.